My name is Mustafa Akawan, and I'm here with my co-host Senge Shirin, covering another podcast and another episode on the Human Rights Sentinel. We are here. Our guest is Dr. Saleem Javed. He is a medical doctor by profession, writer, and human rights activist. He is from Hazara, Quetta Pakistan, currently living in Gothenburg, Sweden. Dr. Saleem is a human rights activist and minority Hazara advocate for decades. He reported and written about the Hazara suffering and the systematic killing and abuse of the Hazara. He cooperated with Human Rights Watch, the United Nations, and many international organizations, collecting evidence and eyewitness testimonies of this systematic attack against the Hazara community. His articles are published both national and international publications, such as Pakistan's largest English newspaper, Dawn News, and Daily. Dr. Saleem, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, Dr. Saleem.
Thank you, Singh.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey. Being a medical doctor and working in that field, now writing and advocating for the Hazara.
Yeah, that's a very good question to begin with, because as you said, I'm a medical doctor. I was actually not educated. I was not trained to write. I was not trained to be an activist. I was trained to be a medical doctor. But the situation for us Hazaras in Pakistan got so deteriorated in the from the beginning of 2000, actually from 1998 onwards, that at some point, when I was actually a medical student, I was feeling that there is a lot of misinformation about the Hazaras and about the persecution of Hazaras, and also a lot of negative propaganda against the community. And moreover, there was there was total blackout in Pakistani media about the killing of the Hazaras in Pakistan. So I was started basically actually at that time simply on to correct some of the facts. So I started through social media, and then I started on my own blog. At that time, it was the WordPress was only available that we could write and express our feelings. So it was like, if I give you an example, there were many times that the Pakistanis either totally ignored the killing of the Hazaras, or if they mentioned, they could not differentiate between the Hazara community as people and the Hazara district, which is a district in near Abbottabad in KPK. So it was like they were like mixing it up all the times. Like there was many media, even the journalists, some of the journalists who used to report. So they would report like the attacks in Hazara, not the attacks on Hazara. So they were confused, and they could not differentiate that they're two different provinces. Even they could not differentiate which province are these people being killed, or are the people who are being killed, or it is a district being attacked. So it was like very much ignorance about the issue, particularly in the mainstream media. So it was like I started there. So I started like blogging, writing about, my very first article was like, who are the Hazaras? So there I literally went on to explain to the Pakistani journalists, Pakistani media, and Pakistani politicians that there is a district which is called the Hazara, and there are people who are called Hazaras. The very disheartening part of all this was that the killers, the terrorists, and the patrons, they knew every detail about every Hazara, like their targets were well planned. They would follow up their targets. They would chase their targets until they were successful in the assassination, and they would distinguish who the Hazaras are from miles away. But those who were supposed to protect the Hazaras, those who were supposed to report about the persecution of Hazaras and the killing of Hazaras, so they could not differentiate between people in a district. Long story short, so I started writing about the issue. I started writing of the people first, simply as a usual blogger, and then I started writing like more in details about the backgrounds of the killings, and as to why are the Hazaras the targets, and what are what have been the consequences of those attacks, and the outcomes. So I started writing about that, and then it started some sort of systematic investigations myself as well, because there was a shortage of data. It was difficult to collect evidence. It was difficult to even interview sometimes the relatives of the victims, because they were afraid. They would not talk to the media. They would not talk to the activists. They would not dare talk to international rights organizations. So it was like something which I was forced into from my profession coming into this. And then, of course, it was not just, it did not remain limited to the Hazara issue, because it was not just the Hazara issue. So it became like the other minorities in Pakistan. And then, of course, in Balochistan, you know that the situation for the Baloch ethnic group is very dire. So then I had to talk about all those different issues.
All right. Can we say that you had to leave country because of those pressures, or was that your choice to leave the country?
Well, there were pressure. I can give you an example that when I was, I used to do my internship at Bolan Medical Hospital, the only medical college in the province. And then I would receive the telephone call telling me what was the number of my motorcycle. Like nothing more. Like I would just receive a random call calling me, we know the number of your motorcycle, or like we know where do you park your motorcycle. And then, or sometime I would receive would put my telephone in silent mode and wake up in the morning seeing that I have missed 80 calls, 85 calls. And then when I was trying to call back those people, so I would never receive any response. So it was like that. But no, it was not like I left because I was under direct threat. No, I left because it was planned before.
I think what you said about this Hazara and Hazara community, it reminds me that for the longest period of time, people in Pakistan did not know the difference between Baltistan and Balochistan.
Yeah,
and they always
exactly.
thought that Baltistan is Balochistan, and so that is something that I have to do a lot of explaining.
Yeah.
That no, Balochistan is all the way in the south towards the ocean. We're all the way in the north, next to China. So I think there's a lot of ignorance among the community. And recently, I just wrote an article about Hazaras, and I couldn't do any justice within those 700 words. There's so much about Hazaras. The issue is so ancient, so complex, and we thought, you would be the right person to talk about these issues. So thank you so much for joining. And what you do is a thankless job, I have to say. Nobody calls a human rights defender doing some great job. They're always accused of, being an agent of some country, or being an agent of, dark forces or negative forces working against Pakistan and all that kind of stuff. So whenever I talk to any human rights defender, the first thing I do is I say, thank you so much for all the integrity, all the courage that you bring, and the continuity and the consistency in, the work that you've been doing, because this is really important for the Hazara community, Despite the fact that there's Pakistan, there's Iran, there's so many Shia organizations left and right, nobody, stands for the real Hazara cause. So the local people, they need to do it. So you're doing your legwork, and I think it's pretty awesome. Mustafa, do you have any questions?
Yes, two points that you were mentioning, it was very important. One is that the terrorist groups know about Hazara more than the authority, And this is very true in every country and every minority. You see, I'm not sure which 90% I'll say that the authority ignore it rather than knowing it. Some of them, they know it, but they ignore it. But the terrorist groups, they do their study. They know exactly what you are doing, how you are doing, and where you are living. But the authority who have the job of protecting the people are ignoring that issue and letting the terrorist groups to freely work on that. And when the incident happen, they will come and try to act like a human savior. That's one of the things. Another thing is that even though you are a doctor, you saw the need. This is very important for our listener to know and to understand that when you have that ability and you see the suffering of the people, it doesn't matter what is your religion, what is your faith, is the need of protecting the people is something that push you toward working, toward the Hazara communities. And this is very important. I really thank you. And I've seen so many human rights activists who are suffering. As Sengay said, we are accused of everything, but no one really sit down and listen to us and see that what are the things that we are, advocating for.
And I think you mentioned about these people. They know a lot more about their targets than the journalist or other officials. One of the reasons they know so much about the target is because they are being provided with information from the Pakistani intelligence agents. And this is also true in case of like when they kill the Shia Baltis. They know exactly when they enter Taftan from Iran. They know what bus they're riding. They know the route that they were going to take all the way through Punjab. It's more than 1,000-mile long journey, but they still know. So I think, this is something that probably I would like, Saleem to talk about a little bit, about the collaboration that exists between the intelligence services and the Shia killers. What would you say about that?
Yeah, it was very unfortunate because not once, not twice, not thrice, on multiple times, the people would witness that they would not be helped by the security forces. And then the targets were so purely selected that it was not like random. It was not like there are a couple of terrorists who are simply out there and then go after Hazaras to find and kill. No, they had exact information about, like, if I give an example about the Hazara chieftain Sardar Nisar Ali Hazara. He was at that time he was the Minister of Education. So when he was targeted, he survived himself, but his driver was killed. So it was exactly, despite a lot of security that a minister has, the terrorists had managed to come so close to him to almost kill him. And like the very charismatic leader of the only registered Hazara political party in Pakistan, Hazara Democratic Party, the founder Hussein Ali Yusufi, when he was assassinated, it was the same case because nobody would believe that he would be the target, because he was not only he was very popular among other communities of Balochistan as well, and he had very good relations with all the other politicians, and then he was killed. And the eyewitness say that the killers just walked away. It was not that they came on a motorbike or on a car or anything. They had killed him on Jinnah Road, the busiest part of the city, on the bright daylight, and then they had simply walked away.
Wow.
Because that means that you have some sort of a surety that no one is going to apprehend you. No one is going to stop you. No one is going to disturb you. So otherwise, if you come to anybody who knows a little bit about Balochistan, particularly about the Quetta, knows that there are a lot of checkposts by paramilitary forces. Like if I, as a Hazara, if I leave my enclave and I go to bazaar or any other part of the city, when I should explain on exit, where do I go, when I am going to return, and then when I come back, I have to explain again.
Mm-hmm.
But
so it is the victim that is being, questioned, and the killers, they have freedom to just, roam freely.
Yeah, of course. It has always been throughout all these 2 decades that the Hazaras have been killed. So you do not have one single terrorist brought to justice. And there are very grave examples of how apathy and indifference of the authorities. Like the provincial chief minister, when he was asked by a journalist when Hazaras were massacred in Mastung, southern part of Quetta. So he was asked by the journalist that the Hazaras have been killed, and you as a chief minister, what is your message? And then he mocks literally and says that I can send a truckload of tissue paper for the community, for their relatives to wipe up their tears.
Wow.
So
yes.
it was very clear. Yeah, it was very clear that was signaling. So he was signaling that I am either helpless, I cannot do anything, or
I'm with the killers.
Yeah. And even today, despite international outrage, still the Hazaras are confined to their enclaves. And when the target killing of Hazaras were on its high, the authorities had warned Hazaras that any Hazara who wants to leave their enclave and go outside, they should get a no objection certificate. So like if you were supposed to go and buy vegetables, you had to report to police that I'm going to out of the colony and going to buy some vegetables, like the vegetable vendors who were targeted a number of times. So they were forced to first inform the authorities, and then the local police station to provide some sort of escort. And then all the vegetable vendors they were forced to gather at one specific place in the morning, and then they were escorted to the vegetable market to buy the vegetables and then escorted back. And for
recently, I think Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, the new Prime Minister, he was in Quetta, and he used the word which is probably the same word in Persian, but in Urdu he said Muqtadar halqe. Muqtadar means, authoritative, and halqe means circles. He said, I will talk to the Muqtadar halqe about the Baluch genocide and all kind of atrocities that are happening in Balochistan, and which is very strange because in any country with a British parliamentary system, Prime Minister is the highest authority, and yet he was saying about showing his helplessness because he was trying to give us this idea that there is authority superior to him, Muqtadar Khalqi. And obviously he was talking about the military generals who control the law and order situation there. And it is because of the military generals' involvement there that Hazara and Baloch genocide has never stopped. It is going on. Their killers are never arrested. Could you give us some idea of what are the interests of these Muqtadar Halqe in using Balochistan as a killing field and not helping the citizens of Pakistan who deserve respect, dignity, equal rights and protection? Just let them be killed like that. What is the politics now?
Just Dr. Saleem, before you answer that, I just want to highlight to our listeners that when we are talking about the Hazaras, we are talking about the Hazaras in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So the suffering that they have, they equally suffering, and there is so many incidents that is happening. So our protecting and advocating for the Hazara communities, which is a responsibility of every one of us, and the Hazaras in Pakistan and Afghanistan. Go ahead, Dr. Saleem.
Well, of course, I will continue here because the Hazaras of Pakistan are actually genocide survivors. So the Hazara community, of around about 500,000 in population in Pakistan, are actually the descendants of the Hazaras who were forced to migrate out of Afghanistan in the late 19th century by the then king of Afghanistan, Amir Abdurrahman Khan, who invaded the Hazara land, which is called Hazara Job. And then there are a number of historians who have described even that up to 62% of the entire Hazara population was killed by Amir Abdurrahman's forces. And a lot of the Hazaras after that they were sold as slaves, and then they were exported to subcontinent. And many Hazaras were left. They escaped. They left to today's Pakistan. That it was British India at that time, and to Iran. And they make the Hazara communities in Pakistan and Iran, which are now citizens of those countries. And when I come back to Sigge's question, and before going that, we of course we are going to talk more about the Hazaras of Afghanistan during the discussion. There are a number of issues which brought the Hazaras in Pakistan, that the Hazaras became the targets. The first, when the Taliban was brought to Afghanistan, Taliban 2.0, 1.0, the first version, the Taliban went into Afghanistan, and one of the first things that the Taliban did in Afghanistan was committing massacre and genocide against the Hazaras of Afghanistan. They started from the very beginning, killing the Hazaras in Kandahar, killing the Hazaras in Helmand, and then going onward to Ghazni province, and then further onwards towards Kabul and Bamiyan and Mazar-e Sharif. And in Kabul, what the Taliban did, that they from different interlocutors, they tried to convince the then leader of the Hazara Unity Party, Hizb Wahdat Islami, Abdul Ali Mazari, who was a very popular, charismatic Hazara leader. So they convinced him to negotiation, because at that time the Hazaras in Kabul, they were being attacked from different fronts. They were being attacked by Gulbuddin Hikmatyar's forces at one point, and then by Ahmad Shah Massoud's forces at the another point, and then by Sayyaf, the Wahhabi Salafi groups from the north of Kabul. So the Hazaras were surrounded from different parts by different groups, and then the Taliban, they had with their white flags. So they were talking peace, they were talking end of war and the end of killings, and then they had tried to, and later on it was clear that there were some from Iranian intelligence people, and then of course from Pakistan and from different countries that they had tried and convinced Mazari to listen and to come to talk with. They had promised that he would be meeting Mudawmar, and then they deceive him. They lure him into the meeting, torture him very badly, and then throw away his dead body off a helicopter miles away in Ghazni province. So he was supposed to meet someone in Kabul, but his dead body was found in Ghazni. And that started, it was a very strong message to the Hazaras of Afghanistan that this is how we do, because he was very popular, Abdul Ali Mazari, and then that started that after that. So the enmity between the Taliban and the Hazaras, they never faded away. It only strengthened day by day, and then and after that, so the Hazaras, the Taliban went on to Bamyan, destroyed the giant statues of the Bamyan, which is a historical monument for the Hazaras, because these were the ancestors of the Hazaras who had made those giant statues. So the Taliban went on not only destroying, not only committing the genocidal attacks against the Hazaras as people, but even committing cultural genocide and removing everything relevant to the Hazara history. And then onwards went to the Mazar Sharif, and then the Taliban killed indiscriminately and announced there that the Hazaras should, the Taliban's governor had announced in Mazar Sharif at the mosque that the Tajiks should go to Tajikistan, the Uzbeks should go to Uzbekistan, and the Hazaras should go to Qabristan, like to the graveyard. Mm-hmm. So it was an official policy, and they had announced that. So at the same period of time, the targeted killing of Hazaras started in 1998 in Quetta. And after the 2001, the 9/11, when the Taliban were defeated, and then a lot of Taliban fighters returned to Pakistan. So then now they had the Hazaras at their doorstep. And then they started killing the Hazaras like at free will. So there was nobody who would stop the Hazaras. The Hazaras in Quetta, the Hazaras in Balochistan were as naturally against the Taliban, against the policy of Talibanization of Afghanistan, and the Hazaras of Quetta were the only people in Pakistan who went on and protested when the giant statues of the Buddhas of Bamyan were destroyed. So, like all the other Pakistan was celebrating it, protested against it. Like when the Taliban, like everybody in Pakistan was celebrating the Taliban's control of Afghanistan at that time. So the Hazaras were sad because we knew that our brethren in Afghanistan, they're being massacred, they are being killed they're being killed every day. So like the policy, this brought some sense into the segments of Pakistani state that we should get rid of Hazaras. It was one of the.
This is really interesting, Saleem, because I was reading a little bit about history, about the contribution of the Hazaras during the creation of Pakistan. Hazaras were, who were living in Quetta, they were part of the Indian military, and later they became part of the Pakistani military. There were Hazara leaders who sided with Muhammad Ali Jinnah and took an active role in making Pakistan a new nation, and then contributed towards it. And then later, they became part of the Pakistani military and provided their services. And yet, today, the Pakistani military generals, their leadership, the establishment, they've totally forgotten the services and the kindness of the Hazaras, and they have turned against them, and they have found a new ally, as you said, Taliban, who are nurtured in Pakistani madrasas and were trained and provided weapons and all that to go and kill the very same people in Quetta who, have a strong contribution in providing a sustainable foundation for Pakistan. Which is, not very different from when we see, what happened in Bangladesh, for instance, and other parts of Pakistan today, like Karachi, for instance. All these Mahajers who have a great role a very strong role in the creation of Pakistan are now one of the most persecuted people, and they have missing persons just like Baloch and Hazara do. So, would you say that this thing that we see today, what is the role of the United Nations here? Because, we see United Nations being a lot of lip service. Like, how come United Nations have not been able to come up with a strong, recommendations to Pakistan in terms of how to protect, Hazaras, and especially those who are living in Balochistan, right?
Of course, the Hazaras were not only failed by the state of Pakistan. Hazaras had proportionally a very huge part in building Pakistan, in the creation of Pakistan, and then afterwards in building Pakistan up. The Hazaras were brought a lot of gold medals for Pakistan in different sports field, from the military, like General Musa Khan Hazara, who was the commander-in-chief of Pakistan Army. And very ironically, his own father was one of the first Hazaras who were assassinated. Hassan Musa, General Musa's father, he was assassinated in Karachi in 1997. So when the policy changed, so every Hazara felt that we are abandoned by the state, because the state no more wants to take responsibility to protect us. Like all the services that we had provided for Pakistan, all the sacrifices that we had offered for the Pakistan, it was totally forgotten overnight. If you go to Hazara Qabristan, the graveyard, even today, you will find a lot of graves of the martyrs, Hazara martyrs who have fought in the for Pakistan, and who were buried there in different ranks and files. But and very ironically, at the same graveyard, you would also see hundreds of Hazaras who have been killed and buried afterwards. So it was very, and then when the international organizations come, like the United Nations officials, they have never been interested actually. So I have had contacts with many of them, the low-level officials who were supposed to investigate about such incidents inside Pakistan or inside Afghanistan. So they were not interested. And then when you would go and complain again and again and again, they would come up with some very absurd explanation. Like they would justify. I heard it once. One of them. I don't want to name, but I heard saying, "Well, it is a sectarian issue in entire region. This is something between the Saudi Arabia and Iran, and because the Hazaras are Shias, and then like indirectly." Saying that the Shias are the fifth column of Iran, or like they were pro-Iran, and then the sectarian issue is not something we, the United Nations, deal with. So it's not like a targeted specific artist. So this was one of the very serious issues that nobody was trying to accept, the fact that here the Hazaras are being killed without a single reaction from the Hazaras. So sectarian killing is like you kill each other. Like one Hazara group, like if they term it as sectarian killing, they should be like Hazaras killing Sunnis and Sunnis killing the Hazaras.
Exactly,
it was not at all the case. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was absolutely not the case, because Hazaras has not killed not a single person throughout the Pakistan history, let alone sectarian. So it was not. But and it was the same case in Afghanistan when a Hazara procession under Enlightened movement was attacked in Kabul. The then National Security Advisor of Ashraf Ghani, he had told the UN officials directly that you should not talk about the Hazaras, you should not talk about them, about their killings and targeted attacks, because they are the agents of Iran. If you give them space, so they are going to one day become the Hezbollah of Afghanistan.
And yet, what we see in Iran is that the Hazaras are being persecuted. They are being beaten by Irani security guards. They are treated, as if like we're still living in the apartheid era, where one ethnicity had different bathrooms to use. I mean, of course. I mean, tell us more about why is this impression, despite the fact that Iran has been very abusive, and yet I think Hazaras are being ignored just because they have some sort of same religion. I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's a very simple. It is very simple way to justify it, to excuse your own responsibilities as say the law enforcement authorities in Pakistan, or the international organizations, because if you do not say that they are Shias and they have links to Iran, then you have to do something.
Yes.
So in order not to do something, so the best way is to say that, okay, this is sectarian issue. Once the foreign minister of Norway told me here in Oslo directly that after 1 hour discussion, he comes to a conclusion and excuses himself, saying that, sorry, we cannot do anything because our policy as the Norwegian government policy is that we are not going to involve ourselves in sectarian issues. And then it works. It worked in Pakistan, because every time anybody talked about the killing of Hazaras, they were labeled as Iranian agents. They were labeled like you are inflaming and igniting sectarian issues in Pakistan. I was myself was labeled from being the agent of Iran, the agent of Israel, of the Western countries, of India, you just name it.
Yes.
Because it was the easiest way to hush you down. It was the easiest way to just silence you, because to not let you speak up. And the relations of Iranian, the mullah regime, has been very bad with Hazaras. Why? For the first, when the US-led international forces came to Afghanistan, the Hazaras, despite Iranian pressure, decided collectively to voluntarily give all their weapons, to demilitarize all the militia groups, and to announce unconditional support to the to Hamid Karzai's government, and to additionally welcome the presence of the US-led international forces in Afghanistan, which was 100% against the policy of Iran. So Iran was trying to undermine the United States presence in Afghanistan and all other Western countries. So if the Hazaras were the Iranian fifth column, then why were they siding with the US instead of siding with Iran? Mm-hmm. So Iran was really very angry on that, and even before that, Iran was angry because Iran was trying to was angry with Abdul-Ali Mazari, because Abdul-Ali Mazari came up with this very common, very popular slogan that in Afghanistan, issues are ethnic while the slogans are sectarian.
I just go ahead.
Yeah, and that was like the Iran was very unhappy with him, because he was not following the Iranian Shia agenda of creating a Hezbollah-like military unit of Afghanistan. He was talking about the social justice in Afghanistan, equal opportunities for all the ethnic groups, and he was talking about the federalism in Afghanistan. He was talking about equal rights for all ethnic groups and equal representation in the. So he was like when he became like a nationalist leader, so he was the Iranians started campaigning against him, and ultimately against the entire Hazara population, because and same is the case in Pakistan. The Hazaras in Pakistan, they do not have this Shia
religious extremist outlook.
Yeah, of course not.
They don't have it.
They do not have this linkages with Iran that like some like say in Lebanon. So they do not have. There are a lot of things which are which hinders the Hazaras of Pakistan with Iran, and same is the case with the Hazara refugees who from Afghanistan who go to Iran. So they are being tortured, they are being harassed, and they do not have even the right to live a normal life inside the Iran.
Mm-hmm. So usually we stop at 40 minutes, but I think if you guys are okay, we can go to 50 minutes, 10 more minutes, because I want to highlight the situation in Afghanistan. The thing is, Hazara communities, even though that they had the opportunity, they had the weapon to take the revenge, they decided to not do that. That show how peaceful Hazara community are. By the time that they
Yes.
had the power, they had the opportunity. And when you talk about Afghanistan, before this Taliban 2.0 or whatever you want to call it come to the power, the Hazara community had a weapon and they were protecting their area, they were protecting their people. But not even one single evidence showing that Hazara went and took a revenge on their killings. So they always been peaceful, but unfortunately this being peacefulness is backfired on them, and different countries using and abusing the Hazaras in their favor rather than using them in security forces, using them because the
Yes.
Hazara community, the amazing thing is they are in every profession, they are top of the line. If they are in security, if they are in the medical field, if they are in education, they are in the top of the line, and they are working to help their society and their country. And this been proven in many cases. And unfortunately, just to go back to Afghanistan and talk about the all this explosion and bombing of the killing, the class that the many students lost their lives. I talked to one of the professor of that school, and they were saying that the majority of the class that the bomb was exploded in, it was the physics major. So these Hazara who were studying in physics major were the target because they were the future of the country. So
and I would add here, Mustafa, that despite the fact that Hazara have this tribal outlook, and they are in the heart of Afghanistan where they're surrounded by a tribal culture, yet you will see that they pay extra attention to female education. And there will be girls' schools everywhere, and they treat their girls and boys equal. And this is really commendable. It's not possible because Afghanistan has a long history of, given that it also has an extremist Islamic, outlook as well. So I think Hazaras have been very progressive. They have been part of, within Pakistan as well, and as in Hazara Jad and Herat, Kabul, Mazar Sharif. They, as you said, they take a great, pride in contributing towards modern, sustainable livelihoods and living standards.
Yeah. So, Dr. Saleem, all after Taliban taking over the Afghanistan and announcing that they, quote unquote, announcing that they are peaceful and they're trying to bring the justice and peace in the country, which we haven't seen it yet. They told the Hazaras that we are not against you, we are not against the Shias, we are trying to do our best. All this I'm saying is quote unquote because none of them happened. But why this recent explosion is happening? Why targeting the Hazaras? Why targeting the Shias and Mazar Sharif? And why killing Hazaras again?
Yeah, well, actually, the Taliban has continued their policy of cleansing of the Hazaras. Even in the presence of the international forces, as you know, the Taliban were not targeting international forces and U.S. forces from 2016 onwards. So their targets, even before the collapse of the republic, their primary targets were the Hazara educational centers in Kabul, the Hazara mosques in different parts of the Afghanistan, the Hazara sports centers, the Hazara processions and the demonstrations that the Hazaras were staging. So their targets, at that time, their targets were the Hazaras, and then they have continued until today. The same day when Zabihullah Mujahid announced the so-called general amnesty. In the evening of that day, the Taliban fighters destroyed and vandalized Shahid Mazari's statue in Bamyan. Mm-hmm. So like exactly like the previous time. So they killed him, and this time, after announcing general amnesty, they go to Bamyan and they vandalize and destroy the statue of Abdul Ali Mazari, saying that it is haram in Islam and you should not have. While all other statues in other parts of Afghanistan, Taliban do not have any issues with. So, like if it is haram, it is only in Bamyan.
This is Haram one day say.
And
So they wanted to attack your local identity.
so that, and then about the killing. So they continued the killing of Hazaras before the takeover of Kabul and after the takeover of Kabul. Now they simply blame like during the previous regimes that these are other terrorists who are killing. But how is it possible? The same person, the Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is the interior minister of the Taliban, the self-proclaimed interior minister, he says, and it is recorded on different forums, that the security in Afghanistan is 100% under his control. And he has been assuring the entire international community that Afghanistan and the Taliban will not be a threat to anybody, and it will not be a threat to Afghan citizens. But at the same time, the attacks against Hazaras continue as before, and even at some point worse.
Yeah.
The policy of the Taliban is to drive the Hazaras out of Kabul. So this out of the cities, the big cities, out of Kabul, out of Mazar-e-Sharif, and out of Herat, because it was if I go back to Quetta, like it was a policy of to change the demographic of the city. So now the Taliban are working to force the Hazaras out of the cities, because during last 2 decades, as you mentioned, the Hazaras have been progressing very much in different professional fields, and then they bought properties and houses inside the big cities, and they moved from the rural areas into urban areas. And now this is the policy of Taliban to push the Hazaras back to the out of those cities, and at the same time, the Taliban forced hundreds of Hazaras from Daikundi and other agriculturally rich provinces of central Afghanistan, and then distributed those houses and lands to the Taliban fighters. Most of them are foreigners, because they had promised that once we come to power, we will give you lands, we will give you houses, and then they would, of course, the Taliban would not dare to go and take somebody's house in Kandahar, or say in other part and give to Taliban fighters. And who are their targets? The Hazaras. So they come, they force the Hazaras out of their homes, and then they give those houses to the Taliban fighters. And I have heard now that the Taliban are warning that those Hazaras who have left Afghanistan during the evacuation, or before or after that. So they have warned them, generally, that those if you are not returning to your properties, to your houses, they will be confiscated. And of course, so the Hazaras who have left Afghanistan, they are not going to return now, because they know if they will return, they will be killed and they will be slaughtered. So, and what will be the Taliban's excuse? That we had announced that if you do not come back, we will give your properties we will confiscate, and then they will confiscate those houses and properties and will give to Taliban fighters, distribute among the Taliban fighters. And it is a strategy of Taliban which has been before been implemented, and is going to continue regardless of what the Taliban say, regardless of what the Taliban apologists say, and regardless of what the international community, some of them who are now trying to whitewash the Taliban all the time, say. That is unfortunately the sad story.
Mm-hmm. And in some instances, we see that IS, Islamic State of Khorasan, is taking responsibility of killings in Mazar-e-Sharif in Kabul and other places, Baghlan. And would you say that this is just rebranding of the same people who are killing Hazaras? There's some kind of strategic relationship between the Taliban and ISK?
Well, of course, because the ISK has had very close relationship with the Haqqani network, and now the minister, the interior minister of Taliban, Sirajuddin Haqqani, he himself repeatedly has said that the Islamic State does not exist in Afghanistan, and even the Mullah Brother group has also said that the Islamic State does not exist in Afghanistan. So it is very easy that somebody come up or claim the responsibility. But who knows who are these people in reality?
Mm-hmm. They are two sides of the same coin.
under the circumstances, in the very tight grip of the Haqqanis, the Kabul, it is impossible to infiltrate if you are not from among the Taliban. You cannot cross all those areas and go in deep into Dashti-Barchi, the west part of Kabul, where the Hazara population is. You cannot infiltrate all the way and go in and then kill the Hazaras there and then escape unhurt. Same story as before. So it is either the Taliban themselves directly, or we accept that this is the Islamic State. Then the Taliban not doing anything to prevent the attacks committed by the Islamic State. So the result is the same. Either you yourself are attacking the Hazaras, or you let the other terrorist groups attack the Hazaras. Mm-hmm. But you are happy with it because you want the Hazaras to leave Kabul, you want the Hazaras to leave Mazar-e-Sharif, you want Hazaras to migrate out of Herat. And that is the policy of Hazaras to the graveyard, ultimately.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we already passed our time, and I think we need to have another session or another episode to talk about this situation more and highlight those. It needs hours and hours of conversation, and I really I really thank you, Dr. Saleem, for participating and giving us some backgrounds, and I'm hoping that we can reach different committees on the United Nations as well. Each one of us in our role, we are trying our best to highlight those issues and see the success, hopefully, and preventing those. It's going to take a long time to stop this genocide and killings, but at least we can prevent it, and we can highlight those and just let the international committee to work more on their behalf, like they are doing in different countries, like everyone got together right now to help Ukrainians, but Hazaras who are getting killed every single day and every single hour are not, being humans for some reason. Hopefully we can change that. Dr. Saleem, if people want to talk to you and find you on social media, obviously we'll put your Twitter on our podcast. And is there any other way that they can reach you and talk to you?
Yeah, of course. On Twitter, I'm available there most of the time when I do not work, so I am there. That is the easiest way. And of course, my blog, the link is on my Twitter profile, and my email address and other contact details are there. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And as you said, we need hours and hours to talk about this issue, about the different aspects of the Hazara genocide, and about the unwillingness of the local authorities and international community to do anything, unfortunately. And that's why it has been a very, very, very tough period lately, and a lot of disappointment and hopelessness.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hopefully we will be able to talk and continue more about on this.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Saleem Javed. You are listening to Human Rights Sentinel. You can find us on Facebook, HRS Podcast. We'll be happy to hear from you and your suggestion of the person who we can interview.